Reading to Learn Strategies. Let me go ahead and click that for the struggling reader. I have been in adult ed for a long time, over 30 years, and it just seems like yesterday that I started. But 12 years in the classroom, and then I got my own program. After I went back and got my master's in counseling because, as all of you know, we wear many hats in adult ed, and that was one of the most important things was to talk to the people, but to really do things correctly. So it was a good thing that the counseling piece came in. Those of you who are the transition counselors, I applaud you in your efforts to keep our people together. But also, I was a local program director for 20 plus years at a local community college. And with that, I had 2 corrections programs. I had the largest prison in the state that I developed 2 correctional programs. One was strictly a GED program. The other, after I'd been there for a while, the warden called me in, and you hate to be called in by the warden, right? But he said, Chris, we need to start a pre-release program. So from all of the camps all over Alabama, they sent those who were within 90 to 120 days of EOSing be released into our pre-release program. So that's why we had 2 programs. I did go to the state level for a little while and do some state PD for the state. I live in Huntsville, Alabama. I know those of you that wonder where my accent is coming from. Yes, I am in the South, and specifically here in Huntsville. And currently, I work part-time as the national consultant for Aztec software. This is not a vendor presentation, and we talked about that. Christine and I did when we were going through a run-through, and I said, just think that I'm going to talk about Aztec. I am not, but I certainly invite you to go to their website and prowl around if you have some needs. For our agenda today, we are going to talk about reading. We're going to look at the elements of reading, academic reading, and then a whole lot of other things in between. I want to start off with and talk about why this is needed. And I know a lot of you who are on this call, you were hired into adult ed, and you may not have had any training in reading. I had anywhere between 64 and 68 teachers at any given time, over 2,000 students a year in my local program. And I can tell you that when you start looking at your data, you will see that so many of your students, and from just working with them in the classroom, they are that struggling reader. And I wanted to show you on a national level, this is aggregated data from the year that was the most recent year we can access from NRS, 2003, that ended in June 30th of last year. This last June 30th that we just had in 24, that data will not be released until probably January, February, but it is held true every year. So that when we look at all regions, we see that level 2, level 3, and level 4 are the most populated. So, and especially if you look at level 3, which is 4th grade to 5.9, we see that our learners are entering there. Now, we know that not all are entered on a reading score, so some of these may be math, but if they have a low math score, they're probably going to have a low reading score too. So this is why it is so important for us to really target the reading. I do believe within my heart that the majority of students, the majority of learners who miss that GED or high set by just 3 or 4 points, and it's because their reading is not on the level that it needs to be. So with that, 77.2% of our learners that enter our program nationally are on those 3 levels. Just to give you some background and some food for thought, go into your local data and see if your classroom, drill down to a classroom level and see if it plays out about like that. So those of you who use TABE, I wanted to just briefly mention that if you are looking at reading, you're going to find a roadmap, and they do call it a blueprint of what skills are covered. Now, this one, of course, is on reading, and you can see where all of the skills are listed. If we talk about 47% of the reading skills on this level have to do with key ideas and details, then you know your instruction needs to be geared toward this. Also, to look at 42%. So here you've got almost 90%, 89%, that deal with these two subjects. You know that for TABE, you can look at the standard, and you can also see the emphasis level. If it's a high level, there are more questions on the TABE on this level that are taken from the standard. So that's the way they gauge the high, the medium, and the low. You're not going to have many questions from a low standard, but you do want to look at all of your high and your mediums to make sure you've included that instruction. And just another look at the next level. If you use CASAS, then you have the same ability to look into the standards for each level and see. You can see over here on the right-hand side that you've got your ABC. If I can move my little bar, you can see A, B, C, D, and E levels and what is included with the questions for each level. Just so that you'll know that. You can go to CASAS.org to find that. For TABE, you go to their website, and it's under their resources tab. But let's talk about reading to learn. There are two things that most of our students come to us with the knowledge of phonemic awareness and phonics. We're not going to go into this lower level because those are your non-readers. And let me just say here that if you do have non-readers or those that are reading below maybe a fourth grade level, they need special attention. They don't need to be in a group setting for very long. They need to have one-on-one. And I had 2 learning centers, and it really benefited for me to send those lower students, those lower level learners, to those reading centers to get help one-on-one. And we would put maybe 2 or 3 students at the same level and have a volunteer come in and work with them until they got their phonics and phonemic awareness together. With every lesson, I just implore you to do vocabulary development. We're going to talk about vocabulary in here in just a minute. And before I go any further into this, let me just say that if there are questions in the chat, Christine and Rob are both monitoring those, and you can stop me at any point and we'll discuss if you have a concern about it or want more information. So with that said, vocabulary development is critically important for these last 2 things to happen. And that's your reading fluency, which is the speed and accuracy at which your students read. And that is probably the most important skill you can teach, is the fluency. And all 4 of those end up culminating into your reading comprehension. And we'll talk about that in just a minute too. So if we look at the different ways, the different methods for teaching, I've put up the very top, there's no one right way to learn because people learn differently. And a lot of times, if we look at phonics, we know those are the sounds, the letters, the syllables, and the relationship with the blends. But sometimes people cannot sound out those words. So it really becomes important for us to look at different methods. If your learners can do the phonics and you have the ability to teach it, please, by all means, make sure that your students understand it. It is important not only for those beginning readers, but even your struggling readers, if they can sound the words out, then they're going to have a much better chance of being able to hear the word. And I just want to say that all of us have 3 different vocabularies. Let me have a mint first. We have the hearing vocabulary that all of us know words that we hear. A lot of your learners are going to be able to make out a word if they hear it. They'll understand it. We have a speaking vocabulary so that we have words that we can speak, they can speak, and they know those words. They just are not able to put a sight vocabulary with the hearing and the speaking. So with those 3 methods of really being able to have a vocabulary, it's important that we teach phonics to everyone so that they can hear the sounds and be able to at least get those initial sounds.
Christina?
Now, yes.
Can I interrupt you before we get too far away from something that you said? One of our adult ed teachers, Abby, has a question. She's curious why you identify reading fluency as the most important of the elements.
Right, because without the speed and the accuracy, they're never going to get comprehension. And that's our goal. If they're on levels, NRS levels 1 and 2, they're just beginning readers. But you have to build each one of those skills. And by the time they get up to levels 6, 7, 8, 9, where they're really getting to read well, they have to have that accuracy and that speed. Have you ever had a student that read a passage 3 and 4 times, and sometimes 5 and 6 times? And they say, I just don't remember I don't get it. I don't understand what I've read. And I think all of us have had those students. And that is where the speed and the accuracy, they're reading so slowly that they don't remember what they've read in the prior paragraph. So speed is a really critical aspect of fluency. Accuracy too, if they're going to have to stop and look up every other word that they're reading for the accuracy of the comprehension, then they're not going to be able to remember either. So some of these techniques I'm talking about with the sounding out of the word, if they can get the beginning sound and the end sound, they'll say, oh, I know that word, and they can move on without having to stop and look it up. So for that reason, I think speed and accuracy with the entitled fluency is one of the most important things we can really work on, that struggling reader. Now, understand that's the reader that has passed the basics. So I hope that answered your question. Type something else in if it didn't, and I'll revisit that. Anything else, Christine?
Nope, but we're keeping an eye. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat box.
Yes, that's great. Thank you. Excuse me. The next way I want to suggest that you teach some reading it's called the whole word approach. Now, in the limited time we have today, we don't have time to get into these techniques. So Google it, look up whole word. But in essence, it is the reading that we have. Those of you from my generation, and I just want to say, with 30 years in it, you can probably figure out that when I was taught reading, it was the Dick and Jane books. And if some of you are smiling, it makes my heart warm, because with those Dick and Jane books, you remember See Dick Run, and there was a picture of a child, a little boy running. See Jane Run, and a little girl was running. See Spot Run, and the dog was running. So the association there is that those words, seeing and the running, are words that they can gather from what they have seen in the picture. So that is a visual way with the repetition to support some meaning with the words. And I put down here that useful with words that don't match sounds. So we have sight words, of course, that don't have any kind of phonics linked to them. They're irregular words and they have to be taught. So with this whole word approach, this is a way to get those words in a repetitive manner together with the students in their vocabulary. So look up whole word approach. The other method that I'd like to mention today is the language experience approach. And those of you who teach ESL, I used to use it when I taught ESL. It's very effective. And the premise of language experience approach is that when I mentioned a while ago that we have a hearing vocabulary and a speaking vocabulary, and those two need to be married with our sight vocabulary. So you would work with a student one-on-one. You would be the scribe as the teacher, and you would have that student repeat to you something that happened, maybe what they even had for dinner the night before, how old their children are, a little bit about their family. You could make any kind of request that would elicit a response at ease with your learner, and you write down verbatim every word that student has said to you. Short little paragraph, just 3 or 4 sentences, not anything elaborate. You would make a copy of that. You could either do carbon paper or copy it real quick. And then you would give them a copy of what you had just scribed, and go over that vocabulary with your learners, because they know those words to speak them. They know them auditorily and linguistically. So they have those in their vocabulary. They just can't match their sight with those words. So it's a very nice way to really get to know someone and to give them the confidence that they will be able to master reading. So like I said, this is great for not only your low-level readers, but for your ESL students too. So one thing that just will help when you're in the classroom, you know that you're going to do your assessment, and that assessment's either going to be TABE or CASAS. There are other ways that you can do it. If you have someone that is an absolute non-reader, you can do maybe an interview with them just to get them to talk a little bit, so that you can get an idea of what kind of training they've had, what grade they got through, just to get an informal idea of an assessment. There are also oral reading tests. I'm going to give you one that I used in just a minute. But once you have an assessment and you know a reading level, then you need to break it down. Is it a decoding problem, or is it a word recognition problem? And there are several tests that you can do. One of them, and I've put those down. I know this is being recorded, so y'all can go back and look at this. There's one that's called Decoding and Spelling Proficiency Test. It's the DSPTR, and it's one that will let you know whether it is that decoding problem that they're having. There's also one that goes across the content area, social studies, science, and it's an assessment on word ID. It will also be available online. You can Google these and just kind of get an idea of what's needed in your program. If you have very low-level readers, I use the SORT. It's the Slauson Oral Reading Test, and it is a very simplistic test. It starts with K through 12, 20 words in a list, and your students are given 5 seconds to recognize the word and be able to say it. When they get to a point where they stop, where they're frustrated, they can't go any farther. There's a chart on the back where you take that list, say that they've gotten up to 2nd grade, so you got 20, 40, and maybe 45 words they have recognized. And then there's a chart on the back that'll give you a quick grade equivalency. You cannot put these in your database. NRS does not recognize these, but it gives you something to get started with until you can do a TABE or a CASAS with them if you're not doing the literacy levels. Gray is also one, the GORT, Gray oral reading test is another one. So those are going to be some resources for you for decoding and word recognition. And then when you get into starting with your instruction, please start with explicit instruction. Your learners need to have the modeling that goes with that type of instruction, the scaffolding. And y'all remember all this from your instructional days back in when you were becoming a teacher. Explicit instruction is probably one of the best ways to teach reading because you do have the modeling and the supports with the scaffolding that will help your students have success. Look at the content, look at the goals, that just sit down and talk with your learners about where they want to be 2 months from now. Give them that andragological experience. And andragogy, as you know, is the way that adults should be taught versus the pedagogy from K-12. We have to treat our learners as adults so that they have input, they have all they need to be included with the instruction, which brings about collaboration. Make sure when you're giving them reading materials, give them a choice and make sure that it's interesting for them. Because a lot of times if it's not interesting, they're not going to be interested in it.
Christina,
yes.
I'm waiting for a break. We do have another question from
Sure.
Susan. Does the research support that learning to read in English as an English language learner, even if an advanced reader in another language, is the same or similar to learning to read in the first language?
I could give you my thoughts on that. I'm not sure about research, but I just would love to ask you, what is the hardest language to learn? And I think when I did this in front of you, Christine, it was, of course, everybody answers, it's English. So the problem with other language learners is that English is just full of rules. But what makes it such a difficult language to learn, even for those that are proficient in their own language, of course, they'll have an advantage because structurally, they're going to be able to understand subject, verb, object in the English language. But there's so many exceptions to the rules. And so that's what makes English so difficult. So if that's somewhat of an answer to that, I don't have research to back that up, but of course, someone would have an advantage if they were proficient in another language just because they have language skills. We had ESL learners from Guatemala and, Mexico, some of the tribes down there where these students had never been to a day of school in their life. So they had nothing to understand what a subject was or what a verb was or even the pattern for the language. So I hope that answered the question. It's more of a struggle if they don't have the skills. Okay, so now let's look at the different kinds of things that make up phonemic awareness. We don't have time to go through all of these, but I'm going to go ahead and put all of them up. And then you can look at it when you have time to be sure that you talk about these individual sounds. Like I said, even if they can read, make sure that they have an understanding. Some people don't have the ear for hearing those sounds. So that's going to be more of a struggle. But for the majority, they're going to be able to read and at least get started. Look at your phoneme identity. You all remember how we were taught if you recognize that common sound for B, and so it starts with bike, boy, bell. And so you have that common initial sound. You can also go through and do the phoneme categorization, which word does not belong, so that those odd sounds, they can recognize those in a sequence of words. The blending, you go through that where they are listening, excuse me, to the sequence of sounds, like what is the S sound, what is the K sound. When you get over here to doing it in segments, you can break down the words into syllables, and even tapping so that they get the sound, the sh, as it has 3 different distinct sounds. And then the deletion. You can teach vocabulary this way, where you take your base word, mile, you could put the S in front of it to build smile. So there are a lot of ways for that beginning sounds and the beginning phonemic awareness to play into any of the reading instruction that you're doing. I want to draw your attention to this little phrase that I put up here. Weak word recognition skills are the most common and debilitating source of reading problems. So word recognition, how do we teach that if we know that is a critical thing we need to be teaching? Well, it starts off with using those larger units. If I can get that to blink. Yeah. So you've got the larger units with the word families, and you can start like ache, put wake, bake, cake, bake. So you see how you can expand the vocabulary by just using those word families. And then you have distinct spelling patterns in these larger units outside of the syllables. So larger units are important to start with. Then you can move into your advanced words. You've got prefixes and suffixes that, with the inclusion of that root word, will really expand their knowledge of different vocabulary. And then the last one is irregular words. These are the words that don't fit any pattern. Of course, we've got kin and versus kind. They're going to see that KIN and think that kin, it just doesn't work. So you're going to have to teach these irregular words intentionally and specifically. So where do you start with vocabulary? And I want to suggest that with your very low level, you can use tier 1. Just Google tier 1 words and you're going to get a long list of them. I've included this so you can kind of see that tier 1s are just your basic words. We don't need those for instruction when we're in with the struggling reader. They already have those words within their vocabulary. But what I want to suggest is that you start with your tier 2 words, and those are your high frequency words that are used across all of your disciplines, your science, your social studies, your reading skills, your math. So Google tier 2 words and get your list and start teaching from those tier 2 words for your struggling readers. Now, forget tier 3. I dare say that any of us, until we get into college, are going to have the need for any of these type words. These are more of your specific terms that are really detailed into the scientific world and other worlds that your students will hopefully get into when they get into college. But focus on your tier 2 words. This is an example I just took off the web so that you could see. You're going to have them divided up into grade equivalents if you want to. These are your tier 2 vocabulary words. Remember, that's cross-curricular, so that you're going to have a good array of different words that they're going to see frequently across all subjects. You can Google and there's just a list. It doesn't have any kind of grade equivalency attached to it. But if that's what you're comfortable with, then you can get those too. So Google tier 2 words and you're going to get so many lists that you'll be able to find some. I don't care how you teach it, but please Try to incorporate at least 10 new words every class meeting. Or maybe if it's better for you, every week. But get into a routine of starting with these lists and get your students to increase their vocabulary. Now, let's talk about the high frequency words. And to me, it was kind of astonishing that 25% of the words that we read and write are made up of just 12 high frequency words. I'm going to show them to you in just a second. But I want you to think about this. 50% of the words that we read and write come from 100 high frequency words. But if you can teach your students 300 of these high frequency words, that accounts for 75% of the words that they're going to read and write. So learning these important for fluency. They need to be words that can be recognized quickly, that they don't have to sound out. So that's where that fluency comes in, the speed and accuracy of reading with your fluency. And so here they are. And those are your first 12. So if you have, of course, non-readers, those are the ones you're going to start with. Those are your high frequency words that they're going to be able to use pretty quickly. But then go on down the list. If you Google high frequency words, you're going to get the 300 that you can really start using as vocabulary list too. Now, I'm going to hopefully get this started. Rob, tell me if the sound comes up, but this is something for us to have a good time with.
B-O-M-B, bomb. T-O-M-B, Tom, no, tomb. If T-O-M-B is tomb, that's boom, the bomb's over. But no, that's bomb, that's tomb. Get ready. Is this calm or coom? No, that's comb. C-O-M-B, comb. P-O-M-B, poem. No, poem is P-O with an E with an M. Now, P-O-E-M, poem. H-O-E-M, home. No, home is H-O with an M with an E. H-O-M-E, home. S-O-M-E, some. No, that's some. S-O-M-E, some. N-O-M-E, numb. No, that's N-U-M-B. The whole doggone thing is dumb.
And so you can find that on YouTube with Gallagher. I know that it's probably some of you have seen that before, but it is just, it really lets us know that, oh, no, we do not
If you
want
have
to
a
do
child,
that. Stop,
12 or
stop,
older,
stop.
and you'd like for them to get into the best university possible, I have something very
And let me go out of that and go back into this. Sorry, guys. Well, I should have gone one more.
B.
Hang on, I'll get it together in just a second. We're going to go to this one. Okay.
And while we have a stop here,
Yes.
we have a couple questions here. I'm communicating with some people because a lot of people are asking for resources and things that you're sharing, which fortunately at Atlas we have a lot of these things. So this is so exciting that you're talking about these things, and you'll draw more people to our resources. But there are a couple questions here. First question is, at what NRS ESL level would you suggest introducing or incorporating Tier 2 words? That's the first question.
Mm-hmm. And so I would say NRS for your ESL, probably third, level 3.
Is that high beginning? I think that's high beginning. Is it?
I think it is too. Yeah. I would have to have the in front of me, but your NRS level 1 learners are going to be your non-readers. So you could certainly start out with phonics, and of course for ESL they're going to have that phonics because so many of the languages don't have the same sounds as we do with our letter association. By the time they get into level 2, they're building a vocabulary, and I would say Tier 1 would be good for levels 1 and 2. But definitely with level 3 and 4, you could start with Tier 2 and go on. Yes.
Thank you, Christina. And one more question. When we have a short amount of time with students and word recognition is a need for them, Is there a quick way to know what word family or word parts to focus on for, I love how Abby says this, for most juice for the squeeze?
Yeah, and I can relate to that because sometimes I call it they rabbit on us, right? They leave us before we can get really into it. Any of them are going to be good to start with. So just look at your word families. I would go with some of the ones that were just the easier and build. If you give them something that's too difficult, even with a word family, they're going to shut down. So always meet them where they are, of course, from the diagnostics, but step down a level too, and give them some success at first and build their confidence. You know, first and foremost, we are their cheerleaders. And so they have to build that confidence to stay, and maybe they'll stay with you a little bit longer. Does that answer it?
Thank you, Christina.
Okay. So this we would have read together because I think it is so it exemplifies what I'm trying to say about the beginning sounds and the ending sounds. If we can get those sounds even with our struggling readers. Those of you who want to go ahead and read this, but I'm just going to start it and say, according to a research at Cambridge University, it does not matter in what order the letters are in a word. Only important thing is that the first and the last letter be at the right place. So see, that's what I've been talking about. And if you gave this to one of your good readers, they would be able to read it just like I did. And that's because we all have learned to read by associating those first sounds and those, even though if we don't know the middle, we can try to hear that word sounded out and we know it. Just something fun. This one is important, and I would suggest that you go to this website. It's called readingsoft.com. And it is a free online reading test for your speed and accuracy. Do this in the comfort of your home. I would not do it with people around me because it's going to tell you how fast and what kind of a reader you are. And I'm sure you're all great readers. But the most important thing about this is that if your students are taking instruction on the computer, if they're going to take the test, if they're going to take the GED, I know High said is pencil and paper, but research shows us that reading from a computer screen is we are 25% slower than when we read print in a text on paper. So that is significant when we're talking about the speed at which we read. So if you've got students who are going to take the test on the computer, be sure to get them to start reading faster, because when they go from print to the computer, they're going to slow down 25%. And that to me is going to be an important factor when they're timed on these tests. Any questions about that one, Christine, because it's significant.
No, just some comments about how it's super interesting and that is such an interesting statistic. Susan does say, I wonder if the 25% slower is for those of us who didn't learn to read with screens and if that will change.
Well, and I didn't go to the research study. It wasn't on their website, but that would be an interesting factor in there. I don't think that would factor into it because those of us that have been working, we're proficient in reading on the screen, but there's something about the print and the screen and the paper. Maybe our eyes get more tired, you know, from the screen and the light than on paper. I don't know what factors. But it is an interesting study. But y'all go to this free website and you can do one for free. If you subscribe to it, then you can do it with all your learners. So just some facts, and I'm going to move on because I know that time is not our friend today. Tell your students, this is for fluency purposes. Do not read one word at a time. It slows us down. And if you're reading in a book or on the screen, you don't read one word at a time. If we're good readers, our eyes do not stop. And that's what it's talking about. Your eyes don't stop on every word. Your brain picks it up, but it's not going to be able, they're not going to have time to stop and read in their head, say each word out loud, and in their head, one word at a time. Pay attention to punctuation. It is there for a reason. You know that, and there's so many funny ones you could use with them in the classroom. But there's one that I always talk about is that, let's eat, Grandma. And so you're calling your grandmother to the dinner table, but you have a comma. Let's eat, comma, Grandma, is completely different than if we just said it without the comma. Let's eat, Grandma. So it's a funny thing, and it helps them understand the need for that punctuation. And y'all probably have some better ones too. Focus on reading. It is not, your brain cannot focus on two things at a time. I know you may think you can, but you cannot. It is important to understand that when we are reading, we need to concentrate on the reading. We don't need to think about, and you need to teach your students this intentionally. We can't be thinking about where we're going to go after class, or who we're going to meet up with, or what I've got to get at the grocery store, or what I've got to do when I get home. They need to know that when they're taking that test, they need to focus on their reading and try not to let their mind wander. I know that y'all have been trying to concentrate with me, but your mind has wandered since I've been talking, and that is a natural thing. The next thing is to read aloud. And so what we have to do is to read silently to ourselves, and then we can read out loud. And sometimes you want to pair that and have one student read out loud and the other student listen, and then they can switch and be partners again. Record yourself. You could either do this as the teacher and record the passages you want them to learn their vocabulary and comprehend to answer questions about, or you could have them record it and then listen to it. If you can find some speed reading software, it would really be great. Those of you who have used speed reading, and I have before, I used it in the classroom. I love the concept because it, like this is doing with your eyes that's going from one round circle to the next. A speed reading machine blanks out everything except the word. You can expand it to a phrase or a sentence, and then it moves on. It keeps your eyes and your mind continually reading, and you don't have the ability to go back. This one, you can still see some of the things behind it, but a true speed reading machine, you couldn't. So think about speed reading machines. And then, just like anything else, practice makes perfect. So have them read, even if you just do it in the classroom. But if you can convince them to read at home, that's great. There's 4 things we want to talk about very quickly, and these are some of the comprehension techniques that are common across the disciplines, and it's predicting, clarifying, summarizing, and questioning. The first one I want to take up is predicting, and that you think, oh, well, they could make an educated guess. No, they can't. Not a lot of them. It is something you need to teach intentionally. And so when you have, and I pulled this template off the web, you can go on and you see it says nonfiction text. It gives them the things that they're to look for when they're predicting. I predict I will learn about, whatever you've talked about as your text, because this is just getting them used to thinking ahead, making that educated guess, even when you're starting at this level. Start off, please, with something very simple that they can get right. When we do something that we're proud of, or something that we're correct about, there's dopamine is released, and that's our feel good in ourselves. So dopamine is released every time you guess something and guess it correctly. So help them get into that mode of, oh, I did that right. Oh, that's a great feeling. So it's going to encourage them to do more. So start out easy and then make it more challenging. So the two things they need to look for: clues about what the author leaves. And of course, I'm sure you do this in kind of a previewing way. You wouldn't go to the movies without watching what? A trailer now, right? So pretend like you were doing a trailer for your students every time they read something. So that gives them clues about what they're going to be reading. And then you have to get into the background knowledge so that they have something to attach. I cannot stress the fact that background knowledge is one of the most important things that you can help your students access, because then they have something to relate to. Clarity.
Christine, I know I'm going
Yes.
to get booed by the crowd, but we need to wrap things up so people can get to the next session. So just a 1-minute warning.
Oh, okay. So let me just go on with these. I thought I had 10 more minutes. I'm so sorry. So once we get through these, you can see that to clarify, you need to do these things. Watch for the clues that your students don't have a clue about what they're reading. Look for things that I don't know, I didn't get it, I don't understand. And then try to relate it to something that you can pick up with the instructional process. There are different ways to use strategies in the classroom for comprehension. Now, this one is a list 3, it's a 3-2-1. You can Google this quick summarizing strategies. But they need to be able to read something and summarize it, and be sure when they summarize it, they do so in their own words. Take the text, make sure they can identify main points, they can pull out main ideas and key details, and that they can recap. Questioning, I am going to tell you that if you remember, Socrates did this with his students like Plato. Questioning is one of the best ways to develop critical thinking skills, and it is a comprehension. So ask open-ended questions. Don't do things that will solicit a yes or no. Do all of these. This is a quick inference. I wanted to show you this one because use humor in your classroom, because if you can get them to enjoy what you're doing, they're going to do it more, and it's going to be better. So we will close out with a little bit of humor, and maybe you'll have me back next year and we can do this again. I would love to be with you. So thank you so much for joining me. Please let me know if there's anything I can ever help you with individually. You can get a hold of me through Christine or Rob. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Christina. People are saying it was too short. I'm encouraging people to leave in your evaluations. This should have been longer. I know we've got some great things coming up. We have a Language and Literacy Institute and other things we'll be talking about. Would love to have you back. So thank you, everyone. The next session begins at 10:15. Definitely reach out if you have questions. And thank you so much, Christina. This was just so great.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed being with you. Y'all take care and have a productive day. I know you will. Thank you.
Thanks, Christina.
Thank you so much,
Yes.
Christina. Oh my gosh.
All right.
Yep. I'm already
Take
seeing some
care.
would love to have you at Language and Lit. So, and I'm in charge of that conference. So,
Well, you have my contact information.
oh
You can get a
yeah,
hold
I
of me at
do.
any time.
Just
Thank
so
you.
so much great information, and I know you have more great information, and it just aligns so beautifully with work we've done here, and then also adds on more information. So it's, yeah, I'm really glad that we had you.
Good. Okay. Y'all take care. I'm leaving now. Bye.